See now?
Yeah, I can see. Yeah, I can see.
Okay, we have to set up my husband as well, and then we have to. What of that picture?
It's when you
Okay, when I'm ready. Okay. Okay, Mr. Ned is on. Is he on already?
Yeah, he's on.
Okay, what about Mr. AKABUEZE? Okay, let me call him then. The lady of channels, have you put him?
That's what I'm trying to do now.
Please do that. Mute me a bit so that I don't start hearing all the things that I'm saying.
Who is leading? We joined us sooner.
I'm choosing what is there.
You're lucky.
Eh? Choosing what is there.
I'm not sure.
Why is he using my name?
Who is leading?
Who is what? Who is who?
Audio.
Good morning.
The channels face.
Good morning, Mr. Ned.
Good morning, madam. How are you?
You're welcome. Good to see you live.
Same here.
Just waiting to do a few housekeeping things. We'll start soon. Thank
Sure.
you.
Not a problem.
Yeah. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Sorry. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Sorry, we are starting a bit late. I think we have all our guests, special guests in-house at the moment. I can see that we have Mr. Ben AKABUEZE has finally linked up. Even though we can't see him yet, I'm sure he will turn on his camera very soon. We have Mr. Ned as well, and we have Mrs. Ngozi Iwere. These are the three dignitaries in the house this morning for this webinar. So I apologize for starting late. It's just like, digital economy, digital age, technology drives this moment. And once there is a glitch somewhere, then there is a problem. So we're happy to have everybody in-house. I will just quickly go straight to saying the house rules. Some people have been chatting us up saying they have no microphone, they have no cameras. Yes, it is a webinar setup. Most participants will not have microphone and videos at the moment, but once so that we can manage the house. Once the presentations are over and the discussion starts, everybody will have microphone unmuted and microphone icon as well as the video icon. Then every microphone should please stay on mute. And if you want to ask a question, you just raise your hand and we will get you in to ask your question or make your contribution. But otherwise, please let's put off all those microphones. If you have a microphone, if you can see a microphone icon, and put off all the cameras if you have a camera icon. Otherwise, if you don't have any of the aforementioned, we will bring you all in at the right moment after the presentations. So good morning once again, everybody, and welcome to this webinar. Today is the 15th anniversary of the passing to glory of my late son, Anthony Omorege Isa Adebayo Fatai Williams, who was a victim in the hands of terrorists in London bombings of 7th of July, which we call 7/7/2005. We thank God for Anthony's life. We thank God for our lives as well, that 15 years on, we are here and we are able to do this in his memory and to the glory of God. We continue to pray for the sweet repose of Anthony's soul. Just let us take a few moments in silence to remember Anthony. May Anthony's soul and the souls of all the faithful departed, especially those who have died of COVID-19 the world over, through the mercy of God, rest in peace. Amen. Our webinar today is titled Dwindling National Revenues, or rather Dwindling National Revenue, Roadmap to Lifting Nigeria's Youthful Population Out of Poverty in a Post-COVID Digital Economy. As we all know, the world is in the midst of a COVID pandemic, a zoonotic virus that has held the world captive for months now. And as such, it has led to new ways of doing things, new vocabularies like social or physical distancing, and new ways of doing things like wearing of masks, and more use of digital technology, like what we are doing today. A few months ago, we didn't know of Zoom. Zoom was not a household word. But today, the Zoom meetings and webinars, who knew about webinar before now as such? Now webinars are the order of the day. Zoom is there. Google Meet is there. Microsoft Teams is there. All of these have come into play. How are we prepared as a nation to embrace and cope with all of this new technology and way of work? How savvy and prepared are our youths? How are they going to cope educationally and job-wise and otherwise? What, you may ask, is digital economy? I don't know much about it myself, but I do know a little bit, but I'm not going to talk much because that's what the panelists are here for. But to say it briefly, it's an economy that is based on digital computing technologies, or simply put, a web or internet economy. It has its own pros and cons, which I'm sure someone like Mr. Ned will do justice to, especially how it impacts a developing country like Nigeria, which has a huge population of youth and which also has a backbone of poverty of the people. So, to take us through all of this today, are none other than three people. Special guest speaker who did a paper presentation is Mr. Ben AKABUEZE. Mr. Ben AKABUEZE is an economist of repute who has had over 23 years experience in accounting, consulting, and banking, and about 12 years in public financial management. A former MD of Now Merchant Bank, and he also was a two-time commissioner for economic planning and budget in the Center of Excellence, Lagos State. He was appointed DG Budget Office of the Federal Republic of Nigeria in 2016, and his tenure has just been renewed for another term. He has a passion for societal transformation, and over and above all, is a pastor in the Redeemed Christian Church of God. You're welcome, Mr. Ben AKABUEZE. Following swiftly is Mr.
Thank you, it's my pleasure.
Mr. Ned holds a degree in computer education system. I haven't met him personally one-on-one, but we've spoken on the phone, and my dear friend here, Mrs. Iwori, is the one that brought us together, so we are pleased to welcome him. He is the MD and co-founder of Descasio Limited, which is a technology and digital transformation company. How timely. For over 20 years, he has worked in cross-functional roles covering business strategy, business development, planning, leadership, and cloud computing. Descasio is a decade-old company and has grown to become the leading cloud computing service provider in West Africa under Dwindling Ned's leadership. Today, they partner with the top 4 OEMs, cloud providers, Google, Microsoft, AWS, and IBM. Mr. Dwindling Ned, wonderful to welcome you this morning.
My pleasure to be here.
And of course, we must always have a woman with us. Not necessarily because she's a woman, but because she's a woman of substance. My bosom friend, a close compatriot, and my fellow Catholic faithful member, Mrs. Ngozi Iwere, a first-class brain, an African feminist, an activist. You may call her a radical, but she's not a radical. She's an African feminist who has done so much for womanhood, for the empowerment of women. She stands on the pivot of women's rights and human rights, and that's where her battle line is drawn. And she works for the generality of the poor and wants to see the benefits of the greater number, the good for the greater number of people. She has a community. She is the founder and MD, chief executive of Community Life Project, which gives a lot of support and backbone, which is also technology driven, to the poor and the needy and the youths and the women in communities. She's a bottoms up person. So, my dear Ngozi, you're welcome to this webinar. And so that being said, the stage is set. I want to also introduce Anthony's dad, my husband, Dr. Alan Patai Williams, who's also here with us this morning. We welcome him, and we hope that he finds some relief with this program that we have put up in Anthony's memory. And so with that, I would like to quickly hand over to Mr. Ben AKABUEZE to take the floor and give us his presentation. Mr. Ben AKABUEZE.
Hello. Can anyone hear me? I've lost audio.
No, you've not lost audio. We can hear you, Ben. We can hear you.
Okay. All right. No, okay. I wasn't hearing it.
We can hear you clearly. Please go on.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here with us on this occasion in memory of Anthony. And before I begin, I'd just like to, once again, just, I'm not sure whether the word is condolence any longer, it's in 15 years, but maybe more like appreciation to Anthony's parents, Dr. Alan and Miss people and the rest of humanity. And I'd just like to congratulate Anthony's parents for this initiative. Let me apologize for the challenge I had with logging on this morning and ending late. Okay, we'll get on with the presentation. I was asked to speak on the topic, Dwindling National Revenue Roadmap for Lifting Nigeria's Youthful Population Out of Poverty in a Post-COVID Digital Economy. This is probably a subject for a whole dissertation or maybe even a postgraduate program, but we'll try and see how much justice we can do to this in the limited time that we have today. Okay, who is moving on the slides? What do I do? Say next slide, or how do I signal? Okay, that's an outline of my presentation, a few introductory remarks, and then we will situate Nigeria's demography, and make the point of its great youthfulness. And then, speak a little to the revenue, the challenge of government, and focus on the meat of the presentation, which is the roadmap for empowering Nigeria's youthful population in a post-COVID digital economy. Okay, let's go. Just go. That's a placeholder slide. Next. Okay, so without a doubt, the youth play critical roles in national development. And in any society, the youth are the engine of growth and development, which is why societies that have just aging population try to encourage such things as migration to try and freshen up their population. I mean, the youth are bound with productivity and creativity, and these are ingredients for wealth creation in any society. Okay, so the youth are often said to be the determinants of the future of the country. But if I were the youth, I would lay claim even to today, not just tomorrow. So we need the youth not just in the future, but even for today. We have a population in Nigeria of approximately 200 million. I think the latest estimates are about 205 million. And that makes us, one of the largest, the seventh largest in the world, I believe. But more importantly, we have one of the largest population of youth in the world. Okay. We have one of the largest youthful populations in the world. But then the thing about that is that, whether that turns out to be an advantage, and that's what it ordinarily ought to be or not, depends on whether we are able to productively engage this large population of youth. Unfortunately, at the moment, many of our ordinarily productive and energetic youth are unemployed or underemployed or both, and consequently are poor. And we'll come back to that point later on. Next slide. Okay. Unfortunately, our unemployment data is yet to attain the sort of regularity that we desire. For instance, we've got with the GDP number that every quarter now, without fail, we have a GDP number put out. Unemployment data is still lagging, and believe me, it is because it is quite an expensive venture. This unemployment, studies. So, and given the resource constraints, NBS tends to pace that out. So the last unemployment data we have was the third quarter, 2018. And as of that time, the unemployment rate was 23% for the country. Okay, which meant then that 20.9 million Nigerians were unemployed, and we're talking about employable Nigerians. Unemployed, you can only be unemployed if you are first employable and you're looking for work and you can't find. That's what that makes you unemployed. So, but so basically, when you look at even the youth unemployment number, that's even worse as of that third quarter, 2018. Over 50% of our youth were, unemployed, and that's a big problem. Usually, I mean, it is normal for most countries for the youth unemployment rate to be slightly higher than the general unemployment rate. But when we have this kind of situation where it's about double, it's very worrisome. Next slide. Okay. Without a doubt, I think it's obvious that unemployment has probably worsened since 2018, further compounded by COVID-19 all across the world. COVID-19 has created serious unemployment. And so, this has basically come to us to worsen a problem that was, bad enough as it was before this. So some organizations, currently project, given that growing number of youth, this number is now, this is actually over 50%, not 40, over, that it remains over 50. To empower these teeming youth with the knowledge and skills to lift them out of poverty. Somebody unemployability of our young and entrepreneurial population. And Nigeria hawking stick in
Mr. AKABUEZE, we can't hear you. I think you are frozen out. Your connection, there's something wrong. If you can try to see what you can do to get an enhanced connectivity so that we can hear you.
Hello.
Hello, yeah, we can hear you now. Even though we can't see you anymore. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. It's instructive that we're talking about digital.
Exactly.
Having this. So
I'm happy to having this kind of challenge. It shows.
This is part of the challenge.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, I have three optional, three optional connections. That I'm juggling here just to make sure that I stay connected. I have MTN here, I have Glo, and I have the Galaxy Backbone, my official network, and still having this level of challenge.
Well, it is great that it's happening like this. So at least we have you in the chair. So. So I think we were in this slide 3. We are in slide 3.
Yes, I I think are you able to see? Because I'm not seeing the slide any longer. It's
Oh dear,
still
we're
loading.
able to see.
It's still loading.
We're not able to see this.
I'm not seeing.
I'm sharing screen with you.
Yes, I know. On my own screen, it's not showing. So I may have to pull up the presentation on a separate device. So even if the connection breaks, I can
Please
continue.
do that. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So we're on the digital economy front.
All right, but we're back now. So basically, you're saying that here, the opportunity, the real opportunity in the digital economy for Nigerian youth is not necessarily trying to find them jobs, find them employment, 9 to 5 jobs or whatever, but turning them into digital entrepreneurs. So the real big opportunity lies in digital entrepreneurship. But let's go on to the next slide. Okay, and just to make sure that we're all on the same page, digital entrepreneurs include the new digital startups and even the mature digital scale-ups. These are firms that have digital technologies at the core of their business model, and their business is to develop and transform the digital technology just to deliver new and improved products and services to customers. Okay. Digital entrepreneurs also include digitally enabled businesses, which use digital technologies, for example, social, mobile, analytics, and cloud solutions to improve business operations, sharpen business intelligence, and engage with customers through new digital channels. During this, COVID, with all the lockdown, we've seen basically, quite some development in this area. These days now, people sit these are all digital aspects of digital entrepreneurship. Next slide. Okay, so digital skills are clearly the prerequisite for benefiting from the surge in technologies across different sectors of the economy. Okay, so and usually the path of migration is that you start from user literacy and then progress to what we call producer technical skills. But for most of us to survive in this emergent economy, you must be at least digitally literate. And this is just some schematic to show the ecosystem of the digital economy. Let's move on in the interest of time. I think these slides will be available to people. Okay, and so I wanted to just thank the Anthony Fadai Williams Foundation for organizing this webinar, because I consider it timely, because our youth need to be sensitized to these opportunities, especially in the post-COVID economy. I mean, life isn't ever going to remain the same in the post-COVID. And one thing for sure is digital will be a key part of the post-COVID environment. And so this is really a timely thing as we all look forward to emerging from all the lockdowns, as we're easing and the economies are reopening gradually. But therefore, I just wanted to use this opportunity to underscore government's commitment to providing opportunities in the digital sector for our youth. Next slide. Okay. Just next. Again, just to really situate this the Nigerian demography, so we understand. As I said earlier, the 7th most populous country in the world with about 200 million people. Okay, about 3/4 of the population are under the age of 35. That's a large. That's what you call a youthful population. Okay, and we're notable for our high fertility, rate. If our mortality rates were not high as well, only God knows what our population will have been. We have both a high fertility rate and a high mortality rate. But and the thrust of policy is to reduce both the fertility and the mortality rates. But even if these two were to decline substantially, all through, for the foreseeable future, Nigeria will still have a youthful population. And if you note that the Nigerian's population itself is projected to increase by about 40% by 2025, you can then imagine the youth bulge that we will experience as the youth remain a significant part of our population. And therefore, this economy must seek to generate enough jobs to absorb the millions of young people joining the labor market every year. I didn't remember this when I was putting this together. I will have just a schematic using a bathtub to illustrate, because people wonder, when government says we've created this many jobs, that unemployment is growing. The truth is that, the number of young people entering the job market every year, the rate of job creation just isn't matching those numbers. And therefore, in consequence, the unemployment just keeps growing. But the other thing to note is that because of our youth, youthful population,
Okay. We've lost you temporarily again.
And the large unemployment rate. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. What was the last thing you heard me say? Let me see how far back I need to rewind.
Well, about the youthful population growing, and of course, mortality rates very high.
Okay, and that was just now, the slide that we're looking at, it shows that, we have a dependency problem as well. Okay, where in Nigeria, for instance, okay, you have a ratio of 1.1 worker per dependent. So in Nigeria, for instance, for every 100 people who are working, about 88 people are dependents. In Korea, on the other hand, is 2.7 workers per dependent. So in Korea, for instance, therefore, if you had for every 100 people who are working, okay, you probably have maybe something like 35 dependents. Whereas in Nigeria, that number is 88 dependents. And that's a problem also, okay? And the next slide illustrates that problem. Next slide. You can have two countries with exactly the same size population-wise, but the structure of the demographic can make demographic structure can have different implications. So if you look at there, okay, you see the one at the top there. You have two people who are working, two people rowing the boat, and you have 4 dependents. That boat isn't going to move as fast as the other boat where you have 4 people who
Four people rowing the boat, 2 dependents. Another freeze. Lost you again. There's no sound, Mr. AKABUEZE.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now, but you've been off for quite a bit.
Yes, the connection broke and I had to switch network again.
Okay.
I'm so sorry about this. This is really a mess. Okay, so we're moving on to the next part of the presentation, which is to basically highlight the fiscal challenge that government, currently, faces. If you look at that next slide, okay, it makes the point that the government's revenues have really, been on, not really showing any significant growth. Okay, it shows there, for instance, as of 2015, government revenue, that's the federal government, the total revenue available to the federal government is 3.24 trillion naira. Okay, and then as you're aware, 2016 to 2017, the economy lapsed into a recession and revenues declined to 2.6 trillion. Okay, now revenues are back, yeah, 4.6 trillion in 2019, but in dollar terms, in US dollar terms, throughout this entire period, 2015 to 2019, federal government's annual revenues have been less than $15 billion. I mean, this is, if you consider that the budget of University of California for this year is about $38 billion. The total revenue that the federal government has available to it is $15 billion. So, one of the things I hope that I can, dispel, one of the misconceptions I hope I can dispel among our youth today is the lie that their country is rich. The country is potentially rich. I don't think we can debate that. But this country is currently not a rich country. This country is currently a poor country. It's just that we're poor people who like to live like they're rich people. Just poor people who like to live like the rich. And that's a problem. but we need to understand it. So look at the numbers. We have, the lowest revenue to GDP ratio, and I'm talking about public government revenues, the lowest revenue to GDP ratio in the whole world. We have the lowest tax to GDP ratio in the world. Even on the continent of Africa, okay? I mean, our revenue, government revenue to GDP ratio is 8%. The average for Africa is 16%. There are countries in Africa which have, like Morocco, over 40%. And you have people like, South Africa in the 20s. We have 8%. Half the average. As a consequence, okay, and that's why, and with a bulging, when you have this thing with a bulging population, and especially a bulging population of dependents, remember the dependency ratio issue? Government cannot afford to stop spending. And so that's why borrowing, that's why government debt is rising. And unless you can somehow break out of this bind, it will become a vicious cycle. Okay, we have to find a way of seeing, and that's why, as the opportunity presents itself, government is looking for ways to improve revenues. But when the economy is in recession, it's hard for you to seek to improve revenues. Let's look at the next slide, which then looks at the other side of it, the consequence of the low revenues. Okay. At the same time, spending is rising sharply, despite the revenues not growing, the revenues remaining. So if you look at, for instance, in 2015, spending was 4.7 trillion naira. That was the government's, the federal government's budget, actual amount spent. But by 2019, actual expenditure was 8.9 trillion naira. If you have 8.9 trillion naira actual expenditure, remember I showed you the revenue figure on the other, Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can again.
Okay, so so what you then see is you really can't afford to cut spending with a rising population like that. So spending is rising, revenues are not growing. But this poor revenue performance, the revenue constraints, is limiting the government's capacity to deal with the youth development issues. That's why government isn't able to spend enough with youth. Okay, and government, of course, too, has had to come to terms with the reality that government's job really, government can only create so many jobs. And when you have a rising population like this, it's only in places like the Scandinavian countries where government is a major, creator of jobs and continues to be so. But for most of the world, job creation really is, the forte of the private sector, and governments responsibility has to be more with creating the enabling environment for the private sector to create the jobs that are so sorely needed by the growing number of our youth. Okay, next slide, please. No, the next slide. This is just a outline. Okay. So the meat of our discussion this morning, really, the roadmap for lifting Nigerian youth out of poverty post-COVID, and I just show here, some kind of trajectory. We go from trying to, develop digital entrepreneurs and to strengthen the social safety net. So in the interim, while the people are transiting from unemployed to, being employed, there is at least some safety net. That's what the social investment program is about, where 500,000 youth are given jobs and they just basically earn a stipend. I mean, that's really not a way, not a salary as such, a 30,000 naira stipend. Then you have this new one now, where they're talking about a public works program that will provide work for 774,000 young people over a 3-month period and just pay them stipends of 20,000 naira. These are just efforts to provide some kind of social safety net while the people are making the transition to employability and actual employment, whether by themselves or in jobs that get created. Ultimately, not everybody can be an entrepreneur. So some of the youth are going to be able to actually end up employing themselves, employing their fellow youth. Next slide. Okay. The ICT sector has grown in significance in the Nigerian economy. Okay. As of Q1 2020, it contributed 14.07% of the GDP, and it's in recognition of this critical that it's now playing, that the Ministry of Communications was renamed Ministry of Communications and Digital Economy. Okay, so as said earlier, in a post-COVID environment, digital, be it. I mean, the new mantra is digitalize or die. So post-COVID ICT knowledge and skills will be key to lift Nigeria's youthful population out of poverty. And so government has launched what we call the National Digital Economy Policy and Strategy, NDEPS. Okay, and the goal being to empower youth in the ICT area. Next slide. Okay. Under this NDEPS, the Ministry of Communication and Digital Economy seeks to collaborate actively with the private sector and development partners in order to create well-paying jobs for Nigerian youth and also transition them to digital entrepreneurship. The partners working with government on this program include IBM, Google, MIT, World Bank, AFDB, Huawei, Facebook, Microsoft. These are the key partners. And I mean, these are really the go-to names in this field. Next slide. Okay. So just, trying to break this down some more for us. Under this, NDEPS, you have the IBM's Digital Nation Africa, what's called the IBM DNA program. And this aims at increasing digital literacy level among Nigerian youth. It started in March 2020, and they're targeting to 50,000 youth. And this will include I mean, catch them young, right from primary, secondary school, and the objective is to create a pool of Nigerians with digital skills, okay? And they will have some global certification, okay? Next slide. There's also the partnership with MIT. It's called the MIT REAP, okay? Which REAP is an acronym for Regional Entrepreneurship Acceleration Program. Here, the goal here is to foster evidence-based practical approach to strengthening innovation-driven entrepreneurship. And that's, the focus of this one. Next one. Okay, that's what's called the Digital Nigeria, program. And this aims to provide a national platform to improve digital literacy among Nigerian youth. And the emphasis here is on skills for jobs. Remember, as I said earlier, we talk about unemployment, people have to be, employable. And so this targeting to create what we call new collar jobs. In the past, we used to talk about blue and white collar jobs. Now we talk about the new collar jobs, okay? And under this, we have what we call the Boost, which is broadband online opportunities, skills, and tools. Here, basically, there's a lot of online job opportunity, and the idea is to skill up the youth to take advantage of this. I mean, take offshoring and this help desks and all of that. Nigeria has an advantage. We speak English, the world's most spoken language, and we speak English with a fairly decent accent. I mean, some of the countries that are huge beneficiaries of this offshoring of help desks these days, that, and I don't want to name any countries, but that, they speak English, they are English with even a thicker accent than the average Nigerian. Next slide. There is also the partnership with World Bank, AFDB, and Huawei. Okay, and here the focus again is to support skills, digital skills development. Okay, AFDB is providing a $500 million facility for what is called the Nigeria Innovation Program. Okay, the Huawei and the Ministry of Communications and Digital Economy also have a partnership, okay, under which Huawei will establish 100 ICT academies in the country, and the idea is to train and certify 2,000 students. Okay, next slide. The ministry is also, I mean, all of these, all of these programs are actually just also geared towards the goal of lifting 100 million Nigerians out of poverty in over 10 years. Next slide. Okay. This program, I'm not talking about something that is still just on the drawing board. These programs are beginning to show some results already. Over 48,000 direct jobs have been created through this. The target is 2.5 million such jobs by 2023. Seems a tall order, even we're already in 2020, but it's doable. Under this program, over 1.1 million Nigerians have so far trained young Nigerians in digital skills. The goal here, the target is 6.276 million by 2023. And under this program, over 6,160 digital tools to support the skills knowledge development have already been provided. Let's go. Under the the Empower program, for instance, those 500,000 youths that were employed, each of them is provided a tablet, and that tablet is really, loaded with resources that help them really make this transition and develop the knowledge and skills in the ICT area that they require. Government is also setting up IT hubs and centers. Some of the hubs that have been created already, see those locations of some of these hubs across the country. Next slide, we'll just conclude. Way over time now. Okay, so in conclusion, see, evidently Nigeria has a youthful population, a large and growing one at that. Nigeria is projected to be the third most populous country in the world by 2050. The population over 400 million then. I think some numbers say up to 450 million in terms of the projection. And this can be quite frightening, but it's really up to us. We can either position to reap a demographic dividend, or it can become a demographic time bomb. The goal and the hope is that we would translate it into a demographic dividend. Because when you have such a youthful population and that large, then you represent a significant market that people can't ignore. Okay, the digital economy provides a good opportunity for Nigeria to productively engage its youth post-COVID, and government is committed to partnering with the private sector and development partners to create that conducive environment for job creation and poverty reduction. And government is committing to ensuring effective implementation of these initiatives, and hopefully we will reap the demographic dividend as we do so. Thank you for your patience and kind attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ben AKABUEZE, DG Budget Office of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, for this very global and insightful presentation. I'm not going to talk much about it because we have two people in the house who are ably capable to pose some questions and to make their own points, and then to ask questions, and the discussion will open. Also, we will, after they have made their quick inputs and then the discussion opens, we'll open up all the participants' microphones so that they can have access to participating. But clearly, there have been initiatives which I even myself am not even aware of, so I don't know how the generality of the young people would have been aware of, because there is things like Index, IBM DNA, MIT REAP, the new type of job, new collar jobs, not the blue collar jobs and stuff, and Huawei partnership with AFDB, and all of this that is going on. We want to believe that it's not just in paper form, and that we want to be able to pump it out there for the youths, who in themselves are the ones at the base of all of this, to know about it. We are happy that we are doing this, and we hope that to go far and wide for them to be able to know that some of these things do exist, and that one of the key things you're thinking about is digital entrepreneurship, as well as savviness to all of this. But be that as it may, I don't want to label that. I want to call on Mr. Ned, in his capacity of who he is and what he is in the technology field, to come in now. Mr. Daily Ned, please.
Morning, everyone. First of all, Dr. and Mrs. Katai Williams, thank you very much. It's an honor to be able to be here and contribute to the DG. Good morning to you as well, and Mrs. Iwere. Thank you for thinking me worthy to be on this panel. I don't have a presentation to share or show, but I mean, I will speak to some things, and hopefully I can carry everyone along. I mean, I did prepare some notes that I would like to speak on, and maybe by the time I'm done, I did take some notes as the DG was speaking, and there's some questions that I would like to pose or ask or?
Sorry, Mr. Ned, could you raise your volume a bit, please, more, so that we can hear more better?
Okay, I'll just move. Is it any clearer?
Yeah, now your voice is raised a bit more. Yeah.
Okay, all right. So I would change I would not use my bedroom voice. Okay, so I kind of want to look at it from, a little different, what are the economic impacts of COVID-19, understand the sectors in Nigeria that have actually been affected, what's the role of technology in the economy recovery, as the topic for today is, and then of course, just maybe a little bit more on some of the things the DG mentioned, especially around the digital economy initiative, because there are some things, at least on paper, that have happened, but of course there's still a lot of opportunity and challenges that Nigeria actually has. I mean, the impact has been immense. I mean, it goes without saying. We've seen this all around us. There's a general decline in consumption, manufactured goods, transportation. I mean, there's so many sectors that have actually had where we've seen a decline. There's been a decline in investments. We've seen the Nigerian Stock Exchange record one of the worst performances since 2008. There's been a clear decline as well in foreign trade, and Nigeria, and of course even across Africa, has seen a decline in import and exportation of goods and services, especially non-essential trade. The borders have largely been shut, especially for non-essential goods. And of course, and most importantly, we have seen an incredible rise in unemployment. Numbers coming from across Africa have been as high as about 80% in the workforce. In whether it's in informal, formal sector, have actually been impacted, especially in the heightened period when we had the lockdown. Most sectors pretty much were affected, from the tourism, of course, which were probably very high on the list, hotels, entertainment centers, etc. Oil and gas were hit also with a double whammy, aside from COVID caused a decline in the prices in that area. In Nigeria, the manufacturing industry were not left out. Access to raw materials, access to funding, certainly affected the agriculture, the financial services, and even what sort of like the new age financial services, the fintech, were certainly affected as transactions were reduced, have been reduced since the COVID period. Retail, of course, goes without saying, were affected, as well as construction, just about halted to a complete stop. We move on to a role of technology in economic recovery. We have to look at this. What is the importance to customers? What's the importance to consumers, to suppliers, businesses, and the economy at large? As well, of course, looking at governments and what the business executives must do to speed up their digitalization plans. We've got to define the future of work. Mrs. Fatai Williams, you talked about, as you started, how in more recent times, all of a sudden everybody is Zooming, we're using Zoom and Teams, etc. That is a must. I mean, today we're all gathered here. I'm sure if it wasn't for COVID, we will probably be in some event center, all speaking together. But now we're forced to digitally actually communicate, and businesses must be able to do this. A lot of workers are being forced to work remotely, and this is just a new normal that we have. Our digital channels have all changed. The infrastructure, I mean, Zoom recorded, I don't have the numbers at the top of my head, but record revenue over the last 4 or 5 months. There's also a digitally enabled sharing economy in terms of crowdsourcing that we've actually started to see more globally than we are locally, but we do have some locally. If you look at the agriculture sector, for example, where you have platforms that are allowing customers to find suppliers for their needs, such as those for the farmers, being able to rent trucks. We've had that in logistic businesses as well. Also from a digital perspective, of course, enhancing decision-making, using data and artificial intelligence to anticipate predictive customer behavior. And then, of course, there's looking at our digital business model. We all have to pivot to a different level, especially in the government area, which we haven't necessarily seen that pivot happen yet. But I'm sure that I know there's lots of papers that have been written, but our government must pivot to this new way of governance, of working, and embrace digital technology. There are a few case studies globally, especially when you look at the healthcare sector. It's starting to happen slowly in Nigeria, in the private sector. But in the UK, for example, when they had their lockdown and of course in the peak of COVID-19, we're still deep in it, a lot of the UK hospitals and the health service actually transitioned from people coming in physically to hospitals to using digital methods, whether they were using Zoom, consultation, WhatsApp videos. This significantly changed and is changing that industry from the healthcare, the healthcare industry, where only people who are critically ill are actually going into the hospital. And of course, even in Nigeria, I'm sure we've seen a few. I know in a personal case where my mother is consulting with her doctor using WhatsApp. There is a digital economy initiative, and the DJ actually touched on that. Across Africa, you actually have the DE4A, which is the Digital Economy Initiative for Africa. It is a robust plan across Africa to have digital economies, and I think this is a 2030 plan. So between now and 2030, over the next 10 years, for the different countries across Africa. And it focuses on particular areas. It looks at digital infrastructure, especially around internet, and making internet very available, more available across the continent, and of course in Nigeria. We actually have a broadband, a national broadband plan, and I believe it was updated with the new minister, Dr. Pantami. This broadband plan was updated. We've got part of the other digital economy initiatives was really around digital platforms. The presence and use of digital platforms that can actually support greater digital exchange across, so within Nigeria, between Nigeria and other African countries. Digital financial services, giving the ability to pay, save, borrow, invest through digital means, which is the key to accessing digital services and increasing the rate of online transactions. Digital entrepreneurship, and this is very big, and the DG actually touched on this at length, and a significant one, especially for the Digital Economy Initiative for Africa. The presence of an ecosystem that actually supports businesses to generate new ideas, new products and services that leverage some of the new technology and business models. And of course, digital skills, developing tech-savvy workshops and workforce with basic and even advanced digital skills to support increased technology adoption, because there's one thing to have the platforms, but how are we enabling youth of tomorrow to be able to use and embrace these platforms. Nigeria has come and actually has crafted its own plan out of this Africa-wide plan. And the areas, again, they're looking at is improving the digital infrastructure. Of course, we have the largest mobile penetration in sub-Saharan Africa. And the goal, from a broadband perspective, is looking at that space and how do you continue to expand that. We actually can't talk about the digital economy without fixing some of these critical infrastructure. And one that is extremely important is really around electricity. The DG talked about offshoring and outsourcing of help desk. A very important area and something that really should be coming to Nigeria, especially around, because yes, we are an English-speaking country. But part of why we haven't seen an explosion in Nigeria is because of our infrastructure, digital and otherwise. I mean, the cost of us providing services like that is still extremely expensive because internet and last mile solution for internet is very high. We actually have almost non-existent electricity. And of course, that's a whole different conversation, but providing electricity to facilities such as that makes the cost of providing such services to the global, to the developed world a lot more expensive, and then takes us out of that to be competitive, to be able to provide such services. Other initiatives that Nigeria is also looking at is actually strengthening our digital platforms, encouraging e-commerce platforms to thrive, and of course so that different organizations are actually able to work together and people actually use those platforms to interact, and hopefully we have more trade and commerce that actually comes out of that. There's also increasing access to digital financial services. About 37% of Nigerian adults today do not have a bank account, and maybe that number is more. And of course, this is stalling the country's journey towards financial inclusion. But then we actually see other African countries that are far ahead of Nigeria. I mean, that's a huge opportunity, and this is an area that is being talked about for the Nigerian digital economy for Africa initiative. There's also improving some of our policies. Of course, a lot of things drive on policy, and the DG also talked about the new policy that's been put in place. Although again, it is one thing to have policy on paper, it's implementing is really where we need to move away from, because we do a fantastic job with putting policy, and somehow over the years we have failed at actually implementing on those policies. And then of course there's closing the digital skills and knowledge gap. The capabilities and the skills required to develop and use various digital technologies, in all honesty, remain limited to a very small segment of the population. I mean, all of us on this call today are the privileged few in Nigeria. There are still so many Nigerians that have no idea what Zoom is, what Microsoft Teams are. And so we can talk about it on a very high level, but a lot more needs to be done from a skills gap. And it was good to hear the DG talk about some initiatives, training 2,000 people here, 100, etc. But is that good enough? Because if we have 20 million unemployed people, the dent of 2,000 people is hardly felt. There needs to be so much more done. And while I do understand that Nigeria is not a rich country, but what we do with the resources is really, again, a different conversation. And certainly it could be utilized a lot better than we are doing it today. And sort of bringing this to a close, and the most important thing, and one very important thing is, from a government perspective, we need to create a digital-friendly investment climate. We talk about the Microsofts and Googles and all of that. A government that embraces these business models and creates an environment that actually facilitates these digital firms to thrive and actively promotes their digital economy are likely to have much, much greater success in attracting foreign investments. There have been record level valuations and investments over the last few years for digital companies in Nigeria. We've seen lots of companies raise millions of dollars. We need to continue to do this. We need to continue to, and the government needs to do more to be able to create those kind of environments that actually allow for these kind of investments to these organizations. Bringing all of this together, the world, and of course including Nigeria, has accepted a need for digital transformation and optimization. But we will need appropriate resources to reach the expected level of growth. Digital transformation across services, processes, people, skills, and opportunities are critical to make this happen. From practical experience in dealing with such objectives and initiatives, it is actually evident that aside businesses across all industries developing and taking intentional steps to achieve the digital transformation strategy, the government also has a significant role to play in the setup of a digital conducive environment for the private sector to trigger an efficient economy recovery initiative, especially post-COVID. Globally, governments have led the way by setting up e-governance platforms and just an enabling environment, an initiative among others that is compatible with and actually drives digital economy. And we're obviously looking for our Nigerian government to set the tone and lead that digital economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Delined, for that contribution. I thought you were going to end with the questions you wanted to ask for the DG, so he starts to think about it while we bring in Mrs. Ngozi Iwere to make her contribution and her questions. And as we do that, as she comes on, we want to ask all the participants, this is the time for you to start posing your questions. Put some of them in the chat box, and if you're able to raise your hand, you can do so and we would call you. But right now, we want to have Mrs. Ngozi Iwere to speak from the everybody's point of view, and also as a woman speaking on this issue. Because like I attended the conference on poverty years ago in Copenhagen, they were saying then that if women were left to be poor, it's going to be bad for any country who has a swelling population of women, because at the end of the day, if they are so poor, poverty will become a generational thing and it will transcend from woman, mother to children. And I don't know whether Nigeria has now hit that level of generational poverty. If it has, then we are in deep problems. So Mrs. Ngozi Iwere, please.
Thank you, Dame Marie. And
please try to speak up a lot more so we could hear.
Thank you, Dame Marie, Fatai Williams, and good morning to everybody, my co-panelists and attendees. A few minutes ago, I lost my internet connectivity, so I'm going to try to quickly make the few points that I have. I think one of the first things that I want to say is something that has to do with the socio-political, what I call the socio-political infrastructure, or the environment within which what the plans we have heard that the country has and its vision, within which those visions will be actualized. I think there are certain things in the socio-political environment that we need to look at, that if we don't put those things in place, then it's okay to wonder whether we are going to achieve some of these very, very amazing numbers and targets which the DG has shared with us. I heard about 10 million, we're looking at almost 10 million Nigerian youths integrated into the digital economy over, did I hear 2023? Even if we had a longer time frame, that's the tall order. And I will talk about, we're talking about lifting the youthful population out of poverty. Now, there are certain things that are very basic. And those basic things for me is the issue of development. Somewhere along the line, development took a backstage. We need to go back to certain basics that we create this enabling environment for us to get this demographic dividend that we hope for. Let's take, for instance, the link between education and poverty. It's not a coincidence that we have the highest number of out-of-school youth in the world, and at the same time, the highest number of people in extreme poverty. There's a correlation between the two, and it's education has already been seen and known and embraced as a very, very key factor in overcoming poverty. So it's important for us to look at our educational system and overhaul it. Because the question that comes to mind is, these children who are out of school, all these millions of children on the streets and out of school, are they part of this conversation that we are having? Where do they fit into these conversations that we are having now? One thing that COVID-19 made clear to us is we need to overhaul our healthcare system. You need a healthy population to be able to work and to benefit from work. Are we going to continue to run the kind of healthcare system that we have while we are integrating our young people into the digital economy? These are things that we need to think about. The educational curriculum we have, is it a 21st century curriculum? Because a lot of the plans I've heard are programs and projects that are targeting youth, giving them skills and so on. What is being done to have an educational curriculum that prepares the child from kindergarten to be in the digital economy? Because when you are looking at those youths that are 15 years to 35 or 18 to 35, and you are targeting them, well, new children are being born, as the DG said, and the child that was 5 years today, it's going to become 15 years. So systemic approaches are more sustainable and more long-term, because it's your entire population that is in school, especially if we ensure that no child is out of school. So if we are moving all the children into school and the curriculum they're exposed to from school, at least basic education, is preparing them for that. I'm not sure I've heard such a plan. Maybe I missed it, but I think that this is a critical factor that we need to look at if we are as serious as I'm sensing that from the DG that the country is. The second thing I want to talk about is the informal sector. The informal economy. I mean, according to the IMF, the informal sector contributed 65% of GDP. And in short, between 2015 and 2017, what we had in the formal economy was 0.8% growth, whereas the informal economy, 8.5%. So that economy has been contributing significantly. There are different figures that you find online if you go to different studies people give. But what is important is that the informal sector is very huge and very critical to quality of life, to livelihoods for our people. I mean, the DG shared with us how many people depend on what. Now, the paradigm with which the government has responded to the informal sector, it's looking at how to regulate the informal sector. Sometimes seeing the informal sector as a challenge. They are not paying taxes. Their businesses are not registered. You cannot maintain standards. You know, nobody can monitor the standards of how business is done in the informal sector. And policies tend to favor the formal sector. Now, as we talk about moving our youth into the digital economy, we know that a lot of young people are still employed in the informal sector. In short, as people lose their jobs, because the thing with the digital economy is a double-edged sword. Yeah. The more there's automation going on, the more human beings are being let off and machines are taking their job. So we need to also look at the army of people that are going to be thrown into the unemployment market, you know, through the digital economy, not just those that the digital economy can employ. And the drivers of the informal sector, unemployment is one of the drivers. People say, well, I finished school, I didn't get any job, so I'm a keke marua driver, or I decide to become a hairdresser. So I think the government needs to look at how to see the informal economy as a benefit, as part of the solution to overcoming poverty and getting youth out of poverty, and begin to review the paradigm with which it's engaging with that. The other thing is the impact of COVID-19 on this informal economy. COVID-19 has created more poverty, has added to the poverty of people in the informal sector. I mean, the groups that we work with in Community Life Project, the artisans, take the welders, the mechanics, the hairdressers, you know, the hat makers, the bead makers. Once they close down social activities, or these are daily earners who didn't have a chunk of savings. So we are dealing with a situation where people have already depleted their savings. Some of them have depleted their capital. So how is the government going to respond to that in terms of ensuring that people have access to either soft loans or to grants? And all these people who are in the informal sector outside the school system, what's going to happen to them? Are they going to be left behind? So I think that one of the questions that needs to be answered is who is being left behind? The DG talked about the myth that Nigerians are poor, the country is poor and we live rich. There are also myths about the informal sector. And one of those myths is that the informal sector is not organized. But if we look very well, we will find that the informal sector does have its own forms of organizations that can be engaged. I will give an example. If you look at the market associations, the market associations, our politicians know where to reach them and where to find them when it's election time. How do you use that to address some of the things that we are talking about? The third thing I want to speak to is the question of, is it incoherence or inconsistencies or the lack of synergy in policies and programs that are all empowering youth digitally? I mean, NDE is doing something, Youth and Sports is doing something, there is Empower, you know, so the presidency is doing something. The DG just shared with us, you know, another initiative that is going on. We have our information ministries, we have labor, we have humanitarian services. How are these things being coordinated? How are they being synergized to reduce duplications, waste of resources? Lastly, I want to talk about inequality in access to data and ICT resources in general. You know, if you go online, you hear we have 40 million smartphone users. In Nigeria, we have so many million internet users. Now, how much data are we planning with? How many people have access to data? Data is very expensive, as we know. So how many people have access to it? And what is the policy that we have towards making sure? So from where I am sitting, and the little experience I've had working at the grassroots, we have an army of analog youth that I don't know if we are aware that they are there, you know, because it's easy to talk about those who are they say they are digital natives. Young people are digital natives, and many young people are able to take advantage of some of the opportunities. And some of these programs we have will benefit them. But what are we doing about this army of analog youth? So for me, I think that we need to address a multiple of sectors, the challenges in a multiple of key sectors, if we really want to, this vision we have, if we are going to approach it. It cannot be just a focus on a digital economy, on digital access. We need to put development on the agenda and address these environmental factors. One of the lessons we've learned from China and India is when you fix education, you fix healthcare, and people have
We've lost you again, dear NG. Well, when you come up, if you can just wrap up so that we can open the house for discussion.
Yes, so I think I'm going to stop there, but can I just ask a few questions? I know I've thrown up some.
Yes, please ask.
To the DG. One of the questions that I want him to address for us is, how is Nigeria as a government, the borrowing that we're doing as a person who's key in this strategic job that you are in, is borrowing the answer? And how is all this borrowing we are doing, how is it channeled in order to get us into this digital economy that we are talking about? The other thing is the way government is doing its own business. I think Ned mentioned, touched on that a bit. The way government is doing its business. Isn't government that role model of a poor country that is spending like a rich country? So what are the policies or the things that are being put in place to look at the way government business is running? With respect to the ICT and trying to get Nigeria into the digital economy, government is responsible for oversight and is even carrying out programs in many places. How is government itself embracing the digital age in the way the culture of governance is happening in the civil service. For instance, I wonder 74,000 jobs for 3 months, maybe in constructing. How many of these 774 local governments have a website? And were a young person to be trained, you know, to build websites for them, to manage their websites as employment, wouldn't that be something more in the direction of what we are talking about than having 74,000 people go and be carrying bricks at the local government? I have a few more questions, but since there are other people, I think I'm going to stop with these ones. Thank you very much for the opportunity today, Mary. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Ngozi, for that wonderful angle that you have brought in this Zoom into. You have zoomed into so many other angles, and also looking at it from a woman's point of view, the feminine point of view. You have talked about the social sector, the informal sector. You talked about the multifarious initiatives that the government has, but maybe the implementation is what is very important. The synergy of all these various things that are being done that are good in themselves, but the harmony and the synergy, so that we don't, dissipate money, dissipate energy, and then it actually doesn't look like as if government is doing much, whereas the will is there. And you talked about also leave no one behind, which is a policy that even in environment terms, they say leave no one behind, but a lot of people will be left behind at this rate. And all of the army of analog youths that should be addressed. There are questions already, so I'd like to read some of them out so that the DG can, and Mr. Ned, who have been asked questions, can answer. It says, what's the first question? My second question, the first one, my name is Imo Onyekachi. My first question goes to DG, Mr. Ben AKABUEZE. The country has a good plan for the youth based on what has been highlighted. How will these youths of target be gathered and reached? And what mechanism will be used to implement the vision to see the desired success, having in focus so many ideologies like this previously? That's to Mr. AKABUEZE. The second one is to Mr. Ned. My second question goes to Mr. Dele Ned from the same person. How can
sorry, Dame, that first question was quite long, but I think I was trying to write
it again.
I missed it, but you can summarize it for me.
Well, you're just asking how all these things you have put together can reach the youths who are the target population, and that how would it happen, or that these kinds of things have been said before and nothing happened, and that what will make you, what will you do to ensure that what you have now, which are lofty and grand, reach the target audience, which is then the youths in their population. And Mr. Dele Ned's question, how can technology be applied to an effective way to actualize the lifting of the youths out of poverty, since everybody is not technologically inclined? This is what Mrs. Iwere was saying. Is there any plan to train the youths to be technologically competent? And what happens to other sectors that are not technologically based? This is also part of what Dele Ned touched about, and Mr. And Mrs. Iwere as well. So, DG, you can even answer part of that as well. So, DG, over to you, and then followed by Mr. Ned, and also Mrs. Iwere posed some questions to you as well.
Well, thank you very much, Dame, for again this opportunity to further shed some light on. Imo, I'm not sure what demographic you fall into, whether you're among the youth that we're talking about, Imo Onyekachi, who asked the first question. But the truth is that you have broadly, three categories of youth. There are those who have become cynical and despondent, and sometimes you can't really blame them. They just think, oh, this country is not working for us. They don't even bother to look around and whatever. But you also have a group that remains hopeful that, one way or the other, they will seize this country and make the, and so such are constantly on the lookout for. Listen, when I shared my slides, I talked about some numbers of people who've been in already and whatever. There's youth who are actively, looking out for, all of these, for information about these opportunities. I do agree, however, that government needs to do a better job of publicizing this. But when you raise that, they will show you all kinds of indications. They talk about roadshows they've done. They talk about, publications even in the media about these things. I often insist that, well, there's a reason why CNN popularized the culture of repetitive information. I mean, watch CNN over the 12-hour period, you probably hear the same thing item repeated maybe about 12 times, such that it's one way or the other it gets to this thing. So we need to do better in terms of communicating, but there is effort that actually, there are all kinds of occasions, website information available on the website. So you themselves also have to be active in seeking information about these programs. And that's why when I have an opportunity like this one, I use it to also share the information about what's happening. Then Dele, how can technology be used to bring up? What about those that are not technology savvy? When I shared again, some of those programs are designed to even take people right from the basics of digital literacy. But of course, let's face it, and I think it was who talked about the out of school children and all of those, whatever. We have a serious challenge with people who don't even have the most basic form of education. You can't be talking about digital literacy for such people. And the truth is, basic education, strictly speaking, is not in the forte of the federal government. As a people, we have chosen a constitutional arrangement that says we have 3 tiers of government. And these 3 tiers of government have, a constitutionally assigned responsibilities, constitutionally guaranteed share of revenue, including taxing authority, taxing power. And, the federally collected revenues, the revenues accruing to the federation, are shared about evenly between the federal government and these other tiers of government. Unfortunately, Nigerians Nigerians look beyond their local governments, look beyond their state governments, and everybody is focused on the federal government. So even when they talk about, oh, how much is Nigeria budgeting for education, everybody is talking about the federal government's budget. It's really not. So what you find in the federal government's budget for basic education, in order to just support the states, federal government creates what is called the Universal Basic Education Commission. And every year, it devotes 2% of its own revenues, 2% of the government's revenue is put in a fund for universal basic education. And each of the states is supposed to, that fund is supposed to then encourage the states to invest in education, in basic education. First, this country has a policy of compulsory universal basic education, which is the first 9 years of education. It's compulsory in this country. But enforcing that at that level is the job of the local governments and the states who have primary responsibilities for that. What the Fed does is then put together this UBEC fund, 2% of its own revenues, puts it in a fund and says, you state, any project you are in, a number of projects to strengthen basic education, mostly in the infrastructure area, so that it's easily measurable. you bring, if the project is going to cost 100 million, you put 50, the federal government will put 50 to match you, to support you to do that. Guess what? Those funds in the federal government funds stay unutilized because the states are not willing to come up with their own, counterpart funds. And every now and then, when the funds build up in the federal government, whatever, they will try to create flexibility. And it's okay, just fine, you come up with 10% instead of 50% that the law says. So we need to put pressure at those other, and that's not a cop-out, because federal government ultimately has the responsibility for the entire country. But I just thought I should use this opportunity to make that point. It was a point, posed a number of questions. We talked about access to data, what policy to make data able to everybody. I mean, let's face it. The reality is we are still a long way from, when, data will become that, but what will it take? It will take more and more investment. There's already significant investment, in bringing data, whether it's the main one or the Glow, whatever, all of those huge pipelines on the shores of Nigeria is the last mile, getting it to, the homes and the, educational institutions and whatever of users. And that's investment that is really not left to government to make. That's really where the private sector, has to come in. And by the time we have a critical, what government is doing, for instance, the federal government has prevailed on the state governments, to reduce the right-of-way charges. In fact, I know my home state, Anambra State, actually, instead of reducing, even decided recently that they will waive it outrightly. So, but the federal government can't mandate the states. The Constitution puts that in the forte of the state. So all it's been doing is, prevail on the states to reduce this right-of-way charges, make them minimal, so we can have better broadband penetration. That's the only way data will become, cheaper, ultimately. Then we talked about these 774,000 jobs. Why don't they? First of all, okay, those 774,000 jobs, those people are going to earn 20,000 naira monthly for 3 months. That's 60,000 naira. Trust me, the guys who have these digital skills to build websites and whatever, they don't mess with that kind of money. I've tried to employ them even in my church to help support us. Those guys don't, they have better aspirations. So this is really a program to just get, this large number of youths roaming the streets, get them at least to some whatever, put them off, take them off for a period, get them, for some of them, that 60,000 naira in their hands, their pockets might launch them onto some whatever that they start some petty thing and whatever. And by the way, there's no compulsion, even though it's called public works, that they carry bricks. The actual work that they do during those 3 months, even though federal government is paying, the actual work they do is to be determined by the states. Whatever, if the state's need is for them to go and clean up gutters, to tackle flooding, they will do so. If they're these things for them to dig up whatever, they will do so. So it's the states to determine what exactly they do. Then he said government is responsible for oversight and this digital development. How is government itself embracing e-governance? Even if I say so, I'm actually quite as to the progress that many agencies of government are making. Of course, can do better. first, as you know, at the federal government level now, you can't do any financial transaction with government. Even checks are not allowed. Checks are not even, you can't even pay government with a check now. All transactions, all financial transactions are digital at the federal government level now, both in terms of what its collections as well as its payments. Okay. I don't know if there are there might be a few agencies still lagging behind, but that's the case. But when you go to even some of the areas like immigration, whatever, you'd be quite impressed about what they've, they've been, able to achieve in terms of e-governance. The FIRS, people can file their taxes now. You see, their whatever offices file their taxes, make their payments, do all that's e-governance is something that government is focusing on. I think those are the questions that I noted. I don't know if I missed out anything. I can't see any open questions in the Q&A platform yet. Okay, for now, I think the 4 put there have been answered. There's one dismissed, so if there are any more.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. AKABUEZE. I think you've done also due diligence to the Q&A section. You've answered most of the questions I was trying to raise. Some were comments, some were questions, and you've picked them up already. And I just want Mr. Ned to answer his own one quickly, so that we move on quickly. We are almost overshot the timing. Mr. Ned, please.
I was trying to clarify the question.
Oh, okay. Let me try and take it again. It says, how can technology be applied in an effective way to actualize the lifting of the youths out of poverty, since everybody is not technologically inclined? Is there any plan to train the youths to be technologically competent? And what happens to the sectors that are not technologically based, sort of?
Okay. Okay, so I get the idea of the question. The DG answered most of that, and
yeah.
I mean, he did. Unfortunately, the answer is not just in technology, doing anything. I think there's a quote by Mandela that says, "Education is the most powerful weapon which can be used to change the world." If you do not educate the people, then, I mean, how do you develop? And you will have consistent poverty. The government, and whether it's on the federal level, I mean, DG has explained, certain challenges even on the state level. We just look at it as the government, whether it's the state or the federal level. Today has failed Nigerians in pushing forward the education agenda. And until that is rectified, we will always have that wide gap. And unfortunately, technology, I mean, has to come in place when, of course, you have people who are educated. So there's no clear, simple, straightforward answer to that question. Again, like I said, the DG already answered it and talked about the challenges in getting people educated. But there's certainly a lot of room for change, improvement. 2% in the budget for education, I'm sure we can do better. And to educate people, and unfortunately, the people who are not educated just happen to fall on the side and get left out.
Thank you, Mr. Ned. I think there's a hand up from Adeto Ilumoka. If you are hearing us, unmute yourself and ask your question. But as that is going on, I would like to say yes, please. Pardon? Adeto Ilumoka?
Yes. Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Okay. I have just 2 quick comments and questions to any of the panelists who choose to take them up. Earlier on, the DG had raised the question of governance in a way, talking about what the federal government can do, what the states do. And I think this raises the question of political vision in Nigeria, which Mrs. Iwere also raised, political vision and will. I think we cannot get away from that and issues of governance in dealing with this problem. So, for example, the concentration of power and resources in federal government does have to be addressed. A lot of things need to be done at the local government level, and yet the local government level doesn't have the resources and the power that is mandated even in the Constitution. So I think until we deal with some of these issues, we're going to feel overwhelmed and go around in circles regarding political will to actually move into a new technological age. Another thing I wanted to raise regards education. So everybody's talking about education. I think the appropriateness of the education is key. We tend to assume that technological education can only be given, I think somewhere in the background, there seems to be that assumption when you have certain language skills. I think we have to start taking a look at the use of mother tongues in technological education. So many children, even in basic education, appear stupid, in quotes, unable to perform because of their restrictions in relation to language. And so I think we have to address the question of educating in terms of technology using local languages. I think we will see that there is so much talent in the youth that we're talking about, and in particular, young children.
Thank you.
Okay, I was going to make one more point, which
you
also alluded to on the question of the transition period or social provisioning, which the DG had also raised. I think there's also no way around this. And I'd like to ask him, that is the DG and any other person who will contribute to this, how are we going to make this transition without taking care of some basic needs of people? Most countries are now accepting, and the COVID period showed this clearly, that you do have to take account of people's basic needs. The private sector is stepping up, the governments are stepping up and trying to infuse resources into the economy to make sure that people can even survive. I think that this is a big question we'll have to address in this transition period of trying to take our economy to the next level and take account of the fourth industrial revolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Adito, for that, Lemaka, for that contribution. Well, I would even speak to some of those things to say, for example, I as an example, I went to St. Teresa's College Ibadan, and as an old girl who would have been out of school for 50 years next year, we decided to say we want to do a quick back to our school and see what's going on. And I went back to my old school. We've been going back and forth. But the state of education now it's a far cry from when we knew it as a mission school. As we speak, St. Teresa's College Ibadan, as an example, is not going to be able to offer any student on IT at the next 2 examinations, LECA or what have you, because they don't have functional laboratory, IT labs. They are not technologically savvy. How are these children that are going to come out now who are in the school now going to be left out completely because there are no labs, there are no computers, things are expensive, the technological skills are not there, and we are talking of a digital economy, and a school like one of the top girls' schools is not equipped fully well for that. We as a class are going to sort of try and do something to bridge that gap. But there is a lot that is going to come out of the school now without anything. And this is the same in almost every other school that we know about. Education has gone to the dogs. I know DG has explained something about the Subed fund and the counterpart funding and co. But there must be a mechanism, a way to insist to make it work. You can't just leave it open and say, oh, well, they didn't do it, so we can't do it, so the money stays there. No. We need to have some checks and balances and make these things work properly. So I don't know whether you can speak to that quickly as we wrap up, because really and truly it's been a long one, and we are slowly winding down because AFW Foundation has to do a bit of reach out. We are taking some palliatives to some people somewhere in some, poor areas, and we need to also fulfill that task today. So maybe we'll just give a few minutes, since nobody else is raising their hands, to each panelist to just quickly wrap up, 1 to 2 minutes each, and then we'll call it a day. So we'll start with DG, and then we'll go to Mrs. Iwere, and then to Mr. Ned.
Thank you, Dane. I mean, without a shadow of doubt, Nigeria's development challenge is it can be quite daunting. And I've been in this space now. Initially, I thought I was dipping my feet for 6 months, whatever. Now I've done 13 and a half years in, in public, in the public. No, 13 and a half, no, 12 and a half years, I think. I can't even remember. But the point here is, when you come face to face with these challenges, you will realize that they're not as easy as some of us. Before I came into government, I thought it was just, you wave your hand and, you resolve all of them. They're quite deep. So we have to come to terms with the fact, for instance, in education, okay, and this is not defeatist, and this is not how it should be, but the reality is we're not going to be able to reach everybody from day one. That's the whatever. I mean, hear what Dame's talking about, St. Teresa's there in Ibadan. You have that kind of, can you imagine what the situation is in, so the sheer, size and whatever of, and spread is such that this is an elephant. Nigeria's development challenge is like eating an elephant. You'll have to eat it one piece at a time, and you have to start somewhere. If it's the ear you grab, you start from eating from there. And so that's something that I know that for people like myself, them in the development space, they don't like to hear this type of whatever. You have to be included, you have to carry everybody along. But with simple resources, both in terms of money and other resources that it takes, even the manpower. You talk about education, teacher quality is one of the biggest contributors to low educational outcome in Nigeria today. You don't have enough teachers, even if you had all the money today to put fancy infrastructure in the school. So it's really something we all have to be, but the thing is to keep the trajectory in the right direction, keep chipping at the problem, looking at it. COVID-19 has provided an opportunity for the northern governors to come together and tackle the problem of Almajiri, students. So, in every crisis, there is an opportunity. And so I hope we don't waste this crisis. That's one opportunity that has come out for me, even if that's the only thing that came out of this, COVID-19, to be a major achievement. And some of the governors in the North are determined to break that system once and for all. When you talk about this 10 million or 13 million out of school children, that's where the numbers chalk up from. Add up. If these children are now placed in schools, we're going to start making, progress. The social safety net, fantastic. But what COVID-19 has also taught all of us is that we can do with less. Some of the things before now we thought were necessities. For some of us who are more privileged, I'm sure we've seen COVID-19. Some people, haven't moved their wardrobes for months now. All of this, without COVID-19, many of us will have bought in the last 3 months. Will have invested hundreds of thousands, even millions of naira on new clothing. You haven't needed those things. So
yeah.
We want to come to terms with the fact that those of us who are privileged, it's not a cop-out. It's often a difficult thing for me to say, being part of government. And I remember in the early days of COVID-19, I put the post like that, that we should fall back on the extended family system, and I got a lot of abuse. This is a violation of, we need to basically just commit to do a lot more. All of these are lavish, needlessly expensive, extravagant parties. The federal Nigerian wedding.
But also government should lead by example as well. Trim the fat.
I understand, but you see, government leading by example, unfortunately, it takes people, the people holding the government to account. If all the people do, when you say government leading, I've been in the private sector for most of my life. I'm in the public sector now. The difference, the fundamental difference between the private sector and the public sector is the absence of consequence.
Well,
in the private sector, there's consequence for action. Somebody holds you, whatever, to account.
That's what I was saying about this counterpart funding and all that.
And if you leave it to the people who are themselves the beneficiary to hold themselves to to whatever, it's not going to happen. So it's the people who have to basically listen. And so because we talked about the informal sector, that's something I wanted to listen. It's the truth of the matter is that the informal sector is so huge in Nigeria. Part of the way forward, we cannot leave the informal sector the way it is. There has to be some basic level of formalization that needs to happen. People can't just be totally anonymous. That's why people produce all kinds of fake products. You can't track them and what. People have to be, people can't be totally anonymous. So people have to be registered. People have to. That sector, contributes significantly in terms of it, but they don't pay taxes. They pay very little taxes. That's part of why government doesn't have revenue. And that's why governments now start trying to hound them.
Please, let's not go there. Let's not. But this talk of tax. People haven't fed, and you're talking of tax, for goodness sake, crying out loud. We don't even have the basic needs of water, lights, and food on the table. And we're talking of tax. Anyway.
It's chicken and egg. It's chicken and egg.
Yes, did you?
Which comes first?
I know that this informal sector has to be harnessed in. They have to.
But speaking seriously, the small and medium enterprises, in the Finance Act 2019, it now said any business that has revenues below 25 million naira is exempted from tax. It's even exempted from registering for VAT.
Well, some people don't know this. Happy you've said it out, so let everybody take note and let the taxman not go chasing those they're not supposed to be chasing. Who are just trying to make all ends meet in their lives. Really and truly, like you rightly said, it's an egg and chicken thing, but more so, the people need a lot more and a lot more help and recognition that they're going through a lot and they need to be. Because when we talk about COVID-19 and we're saying DG economy, and DG seems to be the new word, the new buzzword, let's not forget that there's also something called security, which also puts all of us out there. We become very vulnerable. If we don't have coastline security and homeland security, how are we going to do digital security? That's one thing that is there that we have to be very careful about, as well as the fact that people just want to live. People just want to live and make something out of their lives. So I will call on Mrs. Iwere to come in quickly. Just 1 minute for each person, Mrs. Iwere, and then Mr. Ned to come in quickly. Mrs. Iwere, are you on? Or maybe she's off. If she's not able to come on, Mr. Ned, can you come in? Yes, Mr. Daily Ned.
All right then.
If you could speak up more this time, please.
Sure. I mean, I'll just close out with something very simple. I mean, the DG mentioned, and I said this earlier, that the country is not rich. The country is not rich, but we waste a lot of money on things we shouldn't be spending on. We should be prioritizing on education, prioritizing on healthcare is extremely important. And to be able to take us out of poverty, to be able to move into this digital economy, post-COVID digital economy, education is key. And whether it's at the states, local, or federal level, there needs to be a total prioritization and focus at that level. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Ned. You said it all when it comes to health and education, as well as other sectors that need a lot of help. But these are the two critical areas that we should be looking at very seriously. And we saw now that people cannot travel out for health treatment. You see now what it is, why we have to look at. I'm happy the chairman of the Presidential Trust Task Force on COVID did confess, that's the SGF, that he really didn't know that the healthcare sector in Nigeria was this bad. And I'm happy that it has come to that level, to the core of government, and they now know what it needs to be done in that sector. And COVID, of course, is coming. Let us be sure that it's not only infectious diseases center that we built after post-COVID from out of these centers that are being built, but real referral hospitals that will be treating people for all kinds of diseases, which was what the National Hospital in Abuja was meant to be, but is not. And when it comes to things like this SIP and all of these funds, there's a saying, a Chinese saying that said, give a man a fish, you feed him for one day, but teach him how to fish and you feed him for life. So we don't even know the amount that's being spent on this, on all of these projects, and yet people are still in poverty. These are discussions that need to be had, and we have to look at all of these things and bring some order and some critical thinking at this digital age to inform our decisions from here on. I was told that my state governor of Edo State was online. If you're still there, we say welcome. Thank you for listening in. You're also someone who's an economist. You can also bring something to the table when it comes to this as Governor Godwin Obaseki. We welcome you, and we hope that you've also gotten something to take out of this discussion to help the teeming youths of Edo State as well as Lagos State, where I'm married to, but I'm originally from Edo State. So I would like to call Mrs. Iwere, if she's around, to also make a last-minute contribution so that we can bring this to a close.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I just want to talk about the issue of something that is immediate post-COVID. It's not about us learning to do less, to do with less, as the DG talked about. I think we need to always make the distinction between the different classes in Nigeria and how things affect them. I think for the low-income people in the informal sector, there are many people who what they are dealing with is starvation. So there is really a serious problem of household food insecurity that we need to look at how to respond to that going forward. And in terms of accountability, government itself, has to be accountable. There are certain things that are the responsibility of government constitutionally, which is the security and welfare of the citizens is the primary purpose of governance. So the DG is in the budget office. I think one of the takeaways from here that I know he has heard this over and over again, just to reiterate it, we have to look at our budget making culture at the federal level, where the money is going, how the MDAs are making those budgets. The other thing is the e-platforms that he talked about. I mean, civil society has been looking at that, and I don't know if you're aware that Budget recently looked at these MDAs and the e-platform, and they found hundreds of e-postings there that money went to, the wrong things, spurious expenditure. So the fact that the platforms are e-platforms does not mean that they are serving the purpose for which they are supposed to serve. So we need to channel money into development, into those social, political environment things, infrastructure that we're talking about, education, healthcare, we cannot ever overemphasize that, and then power infrastructure. We need to look at that. Lastly, the Scandinavian model that he talked about. Why is the Scandinavian model working? Because you just said it's only the Scandinavian countries that are, investing in creating jobs, but they are succeeding. So Nigeria also can look at those models and see what we can borrow from them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Ngozi Iwere, for that. Very well put, very succinctly put, and covered all the areas. Yes, even for me, I can even say that I want to also let the DG know that you can tell the governments that cannot cope the schools that they're taking back from missions, to hand over the schools back to the missions.
To jump in,
Pardon?
Between you and God, you are throwing up too many things that I may be tempted to jump in and then.
Yes, just give us 1 second. I'm saying that if you can bring it to the purview of government, that the schools that they took back from missions, if they're not able to run them, somebody like my school, St. Teresa's College, Ibadan, is in a decrepit state, then they should give it back to the missions to run, so that we have our faith-based schools as we used to have them in the past that can take care of education. So government can't do it all.
You see, again, that's something that has nothing to do with the federal government. It's in the purview of the states.
Thank you very much. We'll chase it.
Anambra State has returned all the schools that they took. So you need to get this thing with Oyo State government. In some
we've done so in the past. The late Mr. Jumoke, may so rest in peace, didn't give us back. Maybe we will try Mr. Shiri, whatever.
I mean, and sometimes it may not be a general government program. Take in Abia State, the old boys of Government College Umuahia set up a trust, and they pressurized the government. It took more than one administration. I think maybe by the third administration, they succeeded.
Yeah.
The school has been
handed over to the first at the time, and they gave us back quite a number of schools under the other administration.
So don't give up. As you said, try. But our time is fast, but these are really all pertinent element issues. But as I said, they are, it's not easy, and we must seek to hold our governments more accountable.
Yes.
Yes. Complaining just on fora like this will not do it. Okay, and
yes.
We need to also strengthen the hand of some of the people within government who are trying to do to drive reforms by back them and basically supporting them. And then also it helps that when, like the one that Gozi complained about, the portal, that's a commendable initiative. Government, with effect from this year, I said every payment that Treasury makes, okay, must be published in a portal that is in the public domain. Any amount over 5 million naira by MDAs and 10 million naira by the Central Treasury. That's a big whatever. So it's because they've taken that step that budget now goes and looks at the details of the payments that have been published and can now say, oh, these ones are not properly described. That's a massive step. So the next step now is to draw that. If that didn't happen, and I'll tell you, I mean, as much as we may minimize it, there are very few countries in the world that have that sort of transparency system where everything payment that you make, you put on a portal. Listen. So now we can go to the next stage, which is drive down that whatever. What is this? And just because an item hasn't been properly described, I started life as an auditor. It doesn't make it fraud. It may be somebody hasn't been diligent, but it's a good thing to ask questions. And we must remain engaged and never give up, because it's our country. All of us own this country. We must. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. We really have a lot more to talk about. It's not a thing for just the one webinar for just 2 hours. And like rightly said, it's a dissertation paper. So I'd like to call on my husband, Dr. Alan Fatai Williams, to do a vote of thanks as we wrap up. Thank you all for participating. Let Dr. Fatai Williams take and do a vote of thanks.
Thank you, dear wife. Thank you, dear wife, chairperson. Well, my job is reasonably simple: to wind up this discussion by giving the vote of thanks to all the participants today. And I would start by thanking Mr. Ben AKABUEZE for his extremely detailed presentation on aspects of the federal government's policies I think we all enjoyed that. It was quite detailed and up to date. Next, Mrs. Ngozi Were, CEO of Community Life Project. Thank you very much for your contributions to the discussions. And we all also, I think, benefited from that. And of course, Mr. Dylan Ned, who's digital technology, I will call him a digital technology guru, who really went into different aspects of the topics today. And I think we also benefited immensely from his presentation. Last of all, I must thank all the participants. I think at the last count, we had about 48 participants, excluding the presenters. And thank you for joining us on this day, and for the time you've taken off today to come and join us, and of course, listen and make contributions. So once again, thanks to everybody for your involvement and contributions today. Thanks.
Thank you very much, my dear Dr. Williams, for that. Thank you. To say that just to say that that we had more participants and they registered, but I think we had over 180 people register. But because of the fact that we have all these internet disruptions everywhere, I'm sure most of them could not log on. If we saw what Mr. Right from the DG to myself to Mrs. Simone, we all suffered today, and yet we want to go digital. So this is a point of note. And I know that Mr. DG, you suffered it, and so you will be able to try and do something about it so that it gets better and better. Thank you all the Reverend Fathers in the house who joined us, whom I can see some of them, the youth chaplain, and Father Obai, Father Ugu, Father, and the youth president of the Sion, Mark Ugu, all of you for joining, the young people in the church, my classmates from St. Teresa's Old Girls Association, class of 671, who I'm seeing online, my University of Ife mates, who are all on board. I thank you very much, and I say we'll do another one again next time. And when we call you, do answer us when we call for you to come for the next round of webinars. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Thank you again, Dr. Alan, Demari, for doing this. And as you said, we will always stand with you in the future.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. Okay. All right.
Have a blessed day now, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.